Ah, okay. So good. Hi, I'm Gabe Preston, and we worked on a project here with Montezuma County for the better part of a year. Um, I'm gonna try to explain how this got started, and then I'll let James kind of jump in and give his piece if I get some of it wrong. Um, Well, Montezuma County applied for a grant with the State Department of Outdoor Recreation, which is part of OEDIT, um, to do this project, the Outdoor Recreation Use and Economic Impact Study. So what was going into that? I mean, there's a lot that sort of goes behind this. Um, it's not a new idea that Montezuma County wants to diversify the economy. That's been on the table for a long time. It's like written in some of the, some of the documentation from the 80s and 90s, the plans, and the awareness that natural resource, the natural resource component of the economy here is very important. Ag is very important, but natural resource in particular, natural gas, CO2, that sort of thing is volatile and it comes and goes. So there's always been this recognition that tourism and outdoor recreation, which are very interconnected in this community, are an important part of I think the way James puts it, it's one of the legs of the stool here, for sure. So that's kind of what led into this. And then, this opportunity, this funding opportunity came up, and there was a standing question out there in the community. It was an honest question. I don't think it was it was designed for anything other than I wonder if outdoor recreation really does anything for our economy. Like, truly, does it? What is the impact of outdoor recreation? Because we see it, we see people out there using the resources, but who are they, and does it have an impact? So that's like the most important part of this study. And what we really spent the bulk of the resources on of the study. But we also wanted to leave the door open for not strategic planning, but strategic thinking based on what would come out of this study. And so the project included the effort to identify implementation projects. And so we identified 5 of them, and I'll explain those toward the end. So that really is kind of what this presentation is about. It's about unloading all the data that we collected and trying to answer this question: how much outdoor recreation use is there, and does it have an impact? Does it have an economic impact on the community, and how much of an impact is that? Spend most of the time talking about that, and then we'll dive into just a little bit with those implementation plans. How we do, James? Do okay? So, yeah, so the county, really kind of got the ball rolling on this. They took, in kind of classic Montezuma County form, quietly sort of took leadership and got the ball rolling on this thing. And so here we are. It's evolving, and so the Monte Loras Coalition obviously includes Dolores County. But this was a county project. So when you're doing a county project through the state of Colorado, you have to stay focused on the county, right? It's not because the county doesn't care about what's beyond the county boundaries. It's just kind of how it works when you do this kind of work. So we're broadening. We're in this, starting today, we're looking further out, other than just Montezuma County. So that's kind of a little bit more intro than I probably needed to give, but maybe it'll save some time in describing the methodology that we took to do this. So we started off by doing an asset inventory. And this is probably a good time to say, when I say outdoor recreation, I also mean heritage tourism, because that is outdoor recreation here, right? We're outdoors. It's kind of one and the same. There are some drive tour opportunities for heritage tourism, but this is really about sort of the outdoor recreation oriented type heritage tourism. So we did an asset inventory, recreation heritage asset inventory, listed everything that we could come up with. We weren't working on a blank sheet of paper because Mesa Verde Country had done some events before where we were building off of work that had been done before. We did sort of an initial supply and demand assessment. So we've got our assets, that's the supply side. What's the demand side? What can we learn about that at the beginning of this study? And then we went out and we interviewed folks. So we interviewed your public lands managers, people that are in the outdoor recreation industry, selling outdoor equipment, running tours, that sort of thing. So we tried to balance between people trying to make a living and people that are in the public sector side of it, and nonprofit. You've got some nonprofits around that as well. So we did that, and then we put this together. We put this information together: the asset inventory, the demand side assessment, the interviews, into basically an introductory slideshow, and used that to kick off a community meeting series in May of 2023. And I know some of you were at that, I believe. And we had one in Dolores and we had one at the fairgrounds. We had that, we got more feedback from that. And that sort of framed the research component of this, where we really dove into the data collection. Your BLM is fantastic at collecting user data. I just haven't really seen that before. I hadn't seen that much data collected for that much time. So that surprised me, and I was blown away. We used it. We just used as much of it as we could get our hands on. So there's trail counts all over the place in Montezuma County if it's on BLM land. And there's also visitation counts, because a lot of these things have gates and entrances, the visitor centers, anything that has National Park Service, they track their information. So we tracked all the user data that we could get our hands on, actual empirical data. With that, we started the intercept surveys. So you can count the users, but you know nothing about them for the most part, unless you walk up to them and talk to them. So that's what we did. We spent a lot of last summer out in Montezuma County, trailside, roadside, lakeside, riverside, collecting surveys, just randomly going up to people and taking these surveys from them. And we'll unload some of that. And then we used all that information to conduct the economic impact analysis, which is really mostly based on visitor spending. But there's a component of it that is the residents actually generate an economic impact because of the motivations for being here. So we'll talk about that as well. And then we went into a process of identifying and sort of prioritizing the implementation project. So that's kind of a background on how we went about this. It's a lot of data, and we'll just fast forward to like one of the main conclusions, which is there are almost 1 million outdoor recreation uses in Montezuma County, in just the county. And so for those of you that are not familiar with 1 million, it's a lot. I mean, it is a lot. So like all of Mesa Verde, that's around 500,000. So there's another 500,000 uses on top of that. From a national, okay, you got a national park like Mesa Verde, and then you match that on just the stuff that we can track, right? That's just the uses that we could actually get our hands on something tangible that said, this is the use. So it's a lot of use for a place that you think of as pretty quiet. Break it down a little bit. A huge amount of the use, there's kind of two categories of assets, I guess, really, or at least the way that I looked at it. There's the dispersed assets. Those are the ones that the locals use. All the trails, the reservoir, the things that are sort of spread from east to west all the way throughout Montezuma County. And then you have these intense facilities like the Mesa Verde Hovenweep, which is not in Montezuma County actually, but it pretty much, you access it from here. It acts like it's part of Montezuma County. So we went ahead and adopted that one. And then Make a State Park, surprisingly busy. Not something, not necessarily a locals place, but surprisingly busy. So there's kind of that category of the dispersed categories in this. So going through this, we had just on BLM trails and roads with the counters that we were supplied using our assumptions, over 76,000 annual uses. And that's a lot of like adjusting for double counting and just trying to make sure that we weren't overestimating the use. That's a lot. 76,000 is a lot of use. It takes a long time to get through that much use on all these different trail systems. But really, if you look at what was like really attracting the big use, it was trail systems, the ones that people know about. Phil's World accounts for a lot of it, and Sand Canyon accounts for a lot of it. But there's new systems like Aqueduct, which are going to get more and more use. So those like pull up into the parking lot, use a whole trail system, very popular. The other thing that's like right there by it is like short, really easy trails to something cool, like the Escalante Pueblo Trail. That thing is like maybe a half a mile long, but there's a Pueblo at the top of it, and people use it constantly to the tune of like over 30,000 uses annually. The visitor center gets a lot of use, almost 30,000 uses annually up at the Cannon Visitor Center. The Forest Service has huge road networks. I don't know if you've noticed over by the West La Plata's very busy over there. And that is really the kind of the only part of the forest use that we could count is where people were accessing the forest on forest roads, because we have counts for those. There's more than this because of like Highway 145 goes through and you have trailheads and access to the forest that we can't count because it's right off the highway. So anyways, just with the uses that we could count, well over 200,000 annual uses up there in the national forests. And just more of it. Geez, campgrounds, that, it's like less than 4,000 uses, but when you think about it, those are visitors. Those are overnight visitors. So actually, it's pretty significant that a handful of 3 campgrounds can add that much to the overnight visitation pool here in Montezuma County. The boat ramps between House Creek and McPhee, the main boat ramp, about 5,000 launches per year that are inspected. So those are like come in on a trailer. Those are real, mostly motorized crafts that are coming in on a trailer. That's a couple of busy boat ramps actually. But there's a lot more use going on. There's a lot of use going on all the different reservoirs, Summit, Jackson Reservoir. You have all these water bodies. You got the Dolores River. McPhee's huge. You can get to it from a bunch of different places. And so this is estimated, but we estimate about 30,000 uses of just muscle-powered, hand-launched watercraft on the other water bodies in Montezuma County. And then, so shift into the national parks. See, the national parks and the state parks, they count their own users. So we didn't actually have to do that. But that adds up. I mean, when you put Mesa Verde, Hovenweep, and Make a State Park next to each other, you got over 500,000 uses right there. And so we're going to shift into the part where we start converting this into economic impact. The take home is like lots of uses all over on all the different assets in the county. Over half of the users out there we found from the intercept surveys are visitors. So a visitor is just someone that doesn't live in Montezuma County. But 45% are visitors, 44% are locals, do live in Montezuma County. And people don't recreate alone much. About 1 out of 5 parties out there are solo. And so people are recreating together out there with about 3 people on average per party size. And so when we convert, we had to take all those user days and convert them to visitor parties, really because when we're doing the intercept surveys, we have to ask, how much did you spend? And people know that number based on the whole group. They don't know it individually. So there are over 181, like about 181,000 visitor parties in Montezuma County using those trails and roads every year. So we can, based on the information that we gathered in the intercept survey, start to estimate how much people are spending. One of the things that we found out is that people, when visitors come here, mostly it's to recreate outdoors. Like that's mainly why they come here. Only 12% of the people that we asked what their primary trip were here for family and friends, and just a sliver for business. So most people are here to recreate outside, and that's the purpose. And they stay quite a while, 4 days on average, over 4 days on average. And one of the things that we asked is like, where are you staying? If you're a visitor, there was some concern that people were hoteling up in Durango and like coming over here and using our stuff and then going back over there. That doesn't happen much. It does some, but most people that are out there using the trails and reservoirs and stuff here are staying in Cortez, Dolores, Mancos. So they're visitors that are benefiting this community that are out there recreating. The spending is in line with state numbers for the most part in terms of the total. So your overnight visitors are spending per party per trip $800 in Montezuma County. And that adds up, right? We talked about hundreds of thousands, like that adds up to a lot of spending. If we average in the day visitors, which do spend money, day visitors from Durango, the average spending from a day visitor party in Durango is $100. So that was one of the questions going into this. Like, did the Durangoans spend any money? Yeah, mostly at the brewery, I'm thinking, but they do spend money. In fact, they could tell you to the dime how much they were going to spend in the brewery. Like I'd ask them, how much money you guys going to spend? They'd, well, I'm going to get the pale ale, and they would just tell me exactly. So they're spending money. And Mesa Verde and Hovenweed, they do their own studies on spending because they're, that's what they do. They've got gatehouses, and they just conduct these studies. So we were able to just pull those studies into this analysis. And to the tune of those 181,000 visitor parties, right? These are the folks from outside, are spending $78.5 million per year in Montezuma County, from what our data tells us. And that's it. That fits within the total visitor spending. The state's got these estimates for how much total visitor spending, and I got paranoid. I'm like, oh gosh, is this more than what the state says? It's definitely not. It fits within that amount. And they're spending it across a lot of different categories, right? So a lot of these are sort of visitor service categories, what you would expect. And this is the overnight visitors. You can see lodging holds a pretty big piece of that pie. If we average everybody out, the lodging goes down, food and drinks, gasoline goes up. But it's still quite a bit of spending either way. The Park Service does their own visitor spending breakdown as well. And it looks similar in terms of the diversification of spending across sectors. This is how much the spending looks when we break it down across all the sectors. This looks about right, but the shopping, gifts, souvenirs is a weak line item in this, and I'll talk about that more. We had to estimate in order to do the economic impact analysis, we had to estimate taxes because we have to subtract that out before we do the impact analysis. But hey, why not know the taxes? This is Montezuma County. There's hardly any sales tax here. But if we add up all the sales tax that is paid by all that visitor spending, it's $3.6 million per year in sales tax revenues generated by that. So the economic impact analysis, when Michelle lives here, when she goes and recreates outdoors, it doesn't make a lot of difference. Like she's gonna have tacos that night anyway, or whatever it is. Like it doesn't change the spending patterns as much as a visitor. So when a visitor spends money in a shop, it has a much more potent impact. And that's partly because it's new money coming in. It's not recirculated, it's new money. It's like export money. It's just new money, and it adds fuel to the fire here. The way we measure that, those impacts are multiplier effects. So somebody spends money, they pay their employees, they pay their vendors, and it just blows that $1 up into more than $1. So we use these multipliers from Bureau of Economic Analysis to turn the spending into economic impact analysis, into economic impacts, and the total economic impact of the 73 million is 100 million. So that turns it into 100. What's interesting, though, is that it gives us the ability to translate that spending into FTE jobs. So that tells us that throughout these different sectors and the multipliers beyond, there are 724 jobs generated, FTE jobs. So they're probably more than 724 people because of the way employment works around here. But it's a lot of people that are affected by that amount of spending. We did talk to the locals. We talked to everybody. It was a shorter survey out there for the locals. What we asked them, once they said we're locals, what we asked them was, well, did outdoor recreation have anything to do with you moving here? And some people said, I've been here forever, and we had an answer for that. So, but for a lot of people, it made a big difference in terms of them choosing where they wanted to be. 76% of the folks of the locals that we talked to out there said that outdoor recreation was one of the reasons that they moved to Montezuma County. 34%, that's 1 out of 3, said it was the reason that they moved to Montezuma County. DOLA says that about 4,000 of your jobs here in Montezuma County are generated by resident services, just serving people that live here. So if we just translate that 34% that said we came here because of outdoor recreation, that's almost 1,400 jobs that are pretty directly affected by outdoor recreation on the resident services end. So it's a significant impact on the economy if we look at how it affects people's decisions to move here. Because when people move in this day and age to a place like Montezuma County, most of them bring their own money. Most of them bring their own money, and they spend that money, and it has impacts in the economy, just like any new money. So you made money somewhere else, you bring that in, for all intents and purposes, that's new money in the community. So it's a big chunk of change and a lot of jobs created. We wanted to take a pragmatic look at some of the ideas that sort of fell out of this. And we were having a lot of discussions with people. We did the interviews, we had the meetings. So these were not, we didn't just make them up. Some of these ideas have been around for a while. But the idea was to come up with some sort of pragmatic ideas that would sort of fit in with the findings from this study. And one of the things that we found pretty early on was that there is a lot of capacity for outdoor recreation in Cannon, and more because BLM's been working on it. They've been making investments out there, painted hand, and there's probably other recent improvements that sort of just open the door for more opportunities out there, or make opportunities that were already there more obvious or easier to access. And in the meantime, like, the locals don't use it as much out there. They don't use it nearly as much as you know, some of the biking and up in Boggy Draw and that sort of thing. So a lot of it's there. Some of it might just be marketing. And so one of the implementation ideas is specific marketing plan aimed toward Cannon. And when I was introducing, like, why is the county involved in this at the beginning, I should have mentioned Mesa Verde Country and the lodging tax, right? So that's the county's authority. That, I mean, Mesa Verde Country is another organization, but it's the county's authority that set all that up and still continues to support it. So this is an idea that is not new, but it's kind of like, I think we really sort of justified that this is something that could be done out there. along the similar lines, your county GIS mapping department is the best on the western side. I've worked all over the place on the western slope. It is the best GIS department, period. So this is something maybe they can help with, but there is not a countywide map of recreational opportunities in Montezuma County. There's like, you can find different, there's different ways you can find it, but there's not like one place. And you don't have to give it away. Like on this map, you could show the things you want people to see, and if they can, all the rest of it's there, they can figure it out if they want. But if you want to channel folks to certain opportunities, a mapping, online mapping tool, maybe some paper versions of that might be a good opportunity to do that. That's big bang for the buck, I think, that one. Getting into a little bit more complicated implementation plans. I talked about the Escalante Pueblo Trail, and these trails like Instagram trails or whatever, where you just get out, there's some attraction. It's really easy to get to. You're not going to break a sweat getting there. There's something cool to see at the end of it. I think that's just, people do that all day. So just brainstorming on where could this happen. And we came up with this, we resurfaced this plan on South Broadway to create sort of a gateway parking pull-off and kiosk from 2010, and started thinking more and more about that. It's right by Hawkins Preserve. And Cortez doesn't have a lot of this great stuff right in town. Like Dolores has got this stuff like right outside of town. You got trailheads in town. Mancos is getting there. But Cortez has this challenge that it's a little ways from town to some of these opportunities. So this is this might be a really good opportunity to something easy that visitors would like right in Cortez. The hand launch watercraft idea. So there's a lot of that out there. There's not a ton of specific. There hasn't been a lot of development specifically oriented toward that kind of use. It's like stand-up paddleboarding has exploded just in the last 10 years. Plastic kayaks are always good. So in poking around and just trying to figure out what's feasible, because there's a lot of rules and regs and that sort of thing around developing new recreational facilities. Basically House Creek is a good opportunity because it's got a little cove, a little protected cove. It's not as busy as a main boat ramp for motorized uses. That's where most of the motor launches go, is out of the main boat ramp. It's a friendly landscape out there. It's a place where the Forest Service sort of said, yeah, I think we can work with this, and it kind of fits in with their plan. They have a management plan over McPhee, and this kind of fits in with it. So those are probably investments that would be well worth it. Just some specific launch sites and facilities for those hand launch watercraft at House Creek. Finally, I was saying earlier about how the retail line item is weak. So when we looked at Colorado's got great data, Longwoods International. The CTO has amazing data, but it's all statewide. Anyways, they have one stat that said that 47% of Colorado outdoor recreationist tourists shop for souvenirs on their trip. Like it's an activity. What did you do? We shop for souvenirs. In Montezuma County, that's 23%. So we got a ways to go. And my assessment of it, especially from the interviews and just experience, is that to some degree that's a supply side issue. It might be just where we are. You may never get up to the statewide average, but to some degree there's not a place to shop. There's not enough shopping to do. So that's what's behind this idea, essentially, that one of the communities here would create a retail shopping enterprise platform. It's like an incubator, business incubator for retail. So most business incubators out there are for like high tech, high value, hard to get jobs, right? Primary industry. This is like backing off a little bit from that and just saying, actually, regular old retail would be good. we're good with that. But it's also retail. I don't know how many of you are in the business. It's hard. It's hard to figure out, man. It's really hard to get started on. It is not for dummies. Retail is difficult. So this is an enterprise platform to help people that might have an idea get off the ground without eating it, as bad as you can sometimes as a first-time business. So that's kind of the end of this part of the slideshow, and I would be willing to entertain any questions. Can we just go straight to that? Do you have anything else? No more entertainment, questions, comments, thoughts, any of that? Yes, sir, Don.
One of the things that I do, I headed up the audit of practice. So almost